Yes. I want to go ahead and say good morning to everyone. My name is Bronstone, Director of Equity, Impact, and Community Initiatives here at the Center for Nonprofit Management. Today, we have a very special group of people who have convened to talk about anti-Semitism, things that we don't usually talk about in this space. So come 2022, I want to let you know that you will see more of these faces and others as we talk real life, real situations, and real opportunities within our Nashville and Tennessee area. We do want to welcome you and others. Be sure to share these videos. Come back to our YouTube page as well as our main page at www.cnm.org and sign up for our community conversations or workshop in and around nonprofit leadership. So we are here today I want to introduce you to Adam, Dr. Adam Bronstone. He will be our facilitator, moderator, and just overall human being starting this conversation. And we also have Deborah Oleshansky. Was I close?
Oh, you're very close. Oleshansky.
Oleshansky. I left a syllable out in my very Dawnstone way, right? I'm the 2-syllable chick. But we are here with others. We thank you for being here. Adam, I know I'd like to go ahead and turn this over to you. We are turning our community open and having Randy and Abby J and Harriet and others who are here with us will be joining us, and those of you who are viewing this video. We just thank you for your time, your space, and your contributions. So how's everyone doing? We like to do just a check-in before we get into the meat of it. If you don't mind, do a check-in in the chat. Tell us what your superpower is, what makes you special, and what you'd like to talk about today. Hey, Miss Miriam Reed, thank you for joining us. We are opening up today's discussion with our superpower and something we'd like to take away from today's discussion with both Adam and Deborah. So Adam, I'll start it off. My superpower is motivation. For some reason, I have a lot of kinetic energy that seems to even go through Zoom. So that's my superpower that I put on every place that I go. And for some reason, I just can't stop. Maybe that's why I have a toddler and I'm almost 50. Yeah.
My superpower is being able to wake up in the morning without coffee.
Yes.
And exist during the day without coffee or any caffeine.
That's awesome, Adam. I'm the same way. If I had coffee, this would not be a pretty discussion right now.
Don would be like from here, be like over here somewhere. Yeah. Keep the Red Bull away from Dawnstone.
Oh yeah, never need a Red Bull unless I'm traveling across the country, physically driving. That's the only time I ever do a Red Bull.
My superpower is the way that I care so much about others. And I want to walk away from this discussion being more connected to my Jewish community about anti-Semitism, because I've experienced it a bit in the past year and I haven't had many people to talk to about it.
This is why we're here, Abby J. Thank you for that. Yeah, and I'd like to just walk away with the knowledge of your lens and life and just learn from you, because over the years I've had what we call many Jewish connections. And actually one of my best and most dear mentors is Dr. Richard Reisenstein from the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, who has mentored me for over 25 years. Bless us. So really thankful to him. And I'd love to have more of this type of discussion because it's stuff we didn't know. So thank you, Dr. Bronstone, for bringing that to us and allowing us to hold the space. Anyone else with their superpower and why they are here, what they want to glean from today's discussion?
I would like to share my superpower. First of all, Dawn, you are my favorite human this morning. I think you give me superpowers. I think my superpower is to use the platform that I have for the better. I hope so. I'm Noam, everyone. And I'm here to help Adam and Deborah this morning.
Excellent. Thank you, Noam. Beautiful. Okay.
So
I'm sorry, go ahead, Deborah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mine is sort of aspirational. My superpower is a power I am working on continually, the superpower of compassion and being able to connect to people where they are and hearing who they are and where they're coming from as opposed to who I am and where I'm coming from. So to really be able to open up between people, to really be able to hear each other so we can start to move out of this very polarized world that we seem to be living in. And so I appreciate this opportunity to just be able to engage and share with people that I haven't met before.
Yes, and so thankful to be in your space, Deborah. Thank you. All right, Miriam and then Randy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Miriam Reed. I'm the new education manager at C&M. So I'm here partially because I'm trying to learn the Center for Nonprofit Management and the culture and the environment. Of course, I echo everything everybody said about Dawn. I mean, she is incredible and her energy. In terms of a superpower, I think it's listening. I echo a lot of what Deborah said in terms of feeling we're in such a polarized place right now, and that, you know, we do have so much in common. So I'm always looking for ways to build those bridges. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Miriam. We absolutely love having you on the team. It makes my job a lot easier because she's education and I'm over here trying to get everybody educated, so it works out. All right, what about you, Randy? Glad to have you here. What's your superpower?
So my superpower is encouraging, finding the silver lining in those otherwise hard and difficult places, and then being able to use that or to encourage someone. And what I hope to get out of today is our residential community is fairly small. But over the last couple of years, we've had the opportunity to invite a couple of young ladies into our community who are Jewish in their heritage, and just being able to gain knowledge to better meet their needs while they're in our community is what I hope to gain today.
Thank you, Randy, for being responsible and making sure that you do your work. I appreciate individuals like you who recognize that we all have differences and that there's a need for us to educate ourselves. So Randy, I'm here for the same reason you are. I need to learn more. You know, it's not enough to have them as mentors and friends and not really understand what it means to live and be Jewish in this society, and especially in a place like Tennessee, what they call the Bible Belt of the South.
Cool of the Bible Belt, actually.
Did you know, Adam, this morning I found out that we have the second highest Kurdish population in the world now. Did y'all see that?
Yeah, the largest outside of Kurdistan.
Outside of, yes.
Yeah, yes, we are the largest there's about 15,000 Kurdish community members.
And they're teaching Nashville State, one of my, what I call my alma maters. I'm a 13-year professor in that space. They are teaching classes, and I love that. So exciting. And Harriet, I know you're on mute. If for some reason you cannot talk, we'd like for you to drop in the chat what your superpower is and what you plan to gain from today. And we're happy to have you here as well. We do know that you may be popping in and out. So we appreciate you being here, and the recording will be available, so you'll get that. Oh, you're unmuted. Do you want to tell us what your superpower is? If not, that's quite okay. I can go ahead and mute you, I think. I can. Yeah, there we go. So if you want, just write it in. So I'm going to go ahead and not take any more of your time. We've had our introductions. Very, very proud to sit at the feet of Dr. Adam Bronstone and his many, 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 many connections here. And I am happy to be a part of this community. And I'm going to turn it over to you now.
So thanks, Dawn, and thanks for the people who are here. And you know, what strikes me is that, of course, I was at your event last week, the Indigenous event, and that is Harriet's superpower, being able to get a haircut and learning from colleagues, is something I wouldn't ever imagine that I could have that superpower. And, you know, I remember, I think, Don, you know, emailing you about how I heard about the, you know, from the people on the Indigenous panel about making sure they have a cultural legacy to their next generation, concerned about cultural appropriation, you know, concerned about building their community, maintaining their community. And as I said to you, that just sounds like us. It sounds like our community as well, right? And how do we do that? Well, we've been consciously going out in finding forums of people who we think, you know, are interested in a civil society, in civic and civil discourse, right? Who we can learn from each other and share from each other, because the end conversation here today is not just about anti-Semitism. It's about how we all take what we're experiencing and what we see others experiencing and move from that to a, you know, whatever society we would like to have. The term usually is tolerant, but you'll see that I have a slide that has, you know, a blank space, because I think that the word tolerant is not the kind of society I want. It feels like someone's going to pat me on my head and say, thank you for, you know, not making a fuss, right? I learned from my late grandmother that no one gets anywhere by not making a fuss, right? As she told me once, when she essentially brought down her condo company, her condo management corporation, at the age of 90, she said, nobody told me to not say something. When I asked her, why didn't someone tell you to sit in the corner in your twilight years and not say something? And she said, nobody told me. And to me, you know, that's my inspiration in life. So we can help you get exactly. So if we can help Randy get some more insight, if we can help Abby kind of engage a little more and feel stronger given the situations that she's come through. I'm always envious. There's one rabbi in our community who grew up in California who said to me once, she didn't ever experience anti-Semitism growing up. And I looked at her and I said, wow, what a wonderful world that might have been. I grew up going to a Jewish day school in Canada, and pretty much every day I had people come past our day school and call us various names. It was just kind of how we grew up at the end of the day. And so to find people who want to engage in this conversation is great. And I always think of the former chair of another organization of mine who said, agreeable people can agree to disagree. Right? We don't always have to agree, but we can agree to disagree in an agreeable manner, right? And that's the most important thing, because we've all experienced cutting people out of our lives, cutting people off our Facebook posts, right? Who suddenly have said things. Thank you, Miriam, for smiling about that. Who've all just said something that we just don't want to be a part of anymore, right? Because they can't hold a conversation. My wife just cut out her cousin from her Facebook feed, who she likes most of the time. So we're going to start off with a multi-part conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about our Jewish community. Thank you, Noam. Look at that. It's great. I don't have to say, click on this. We're going to start off talking about our community a little bit, have a small kind of interactive moment, and then move to talk about anti-Semitism, how that bleeds today into anti-Zionism, and then talk about tolerance and civil society. Before we do that, I want to give my colleagues the floor to introduce themselves. Deborah in the square below me, and Dome in the square above me.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you, Don, for inviting us and for giving us this opportunity this morning. My name is Deborah Oleshansky, and I serve as the Community Relations Director for the Jewish Federation in Nashville. And in that role, I see myself as sort of the bridge between the Jewish community and the greater community. So I'm really thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Noam Harari. I'm from Israel, as you can hear about from the accent. My role in the Federation is called Community Shlicha, Emissary, and I am responsible for doing Israel programming in the Jewish community and the graded community in Nashville. And I'm very, really grateful to be here. So thank you for having us.
Great. So we're going to start again. Thank you. And let's talk a little bit of our Jewish community. And our Jewish community is the worldwide Jewish community, and also specifically our Nashville community. Next slide. I think, we're just going to, let's just go. Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam.
I hope that they will continue my story.
I can't believe I'm here.
So that's a taste of our Jewish world. You saw kids, you saw adults, you saw seniors, you saw Holocaust survivors, you saw a Jewish wedding, you saw our university students enjoying a trip to Israel through Birthright. You really see the range of our Jewish community, in truth, any Jewish community, right? Because we're all trying to do the same thing. And there's our mission. We fundraise. We're kind of like what we call the Jewish version of the United Way. We fundraise so we can do other things. So we can allocate funds to community organizations locally and in Israel and across the world. We do community relations exactly like this. And again, it's our Jewish people. It's the goal to maintain continuity of the Jewish people. Next slide. Actually, no, if you want to just put all the images up, and so these are, again, the faces of our community. In the left-hand corner, that's our staff, actually, a group of 15, 20 of us. And then you see just lots of different faces. You see our young adult Now Gen group celebrating the Jewish New Year. Abby might be in that picture, I can't tell.
Damn.
There you go. She's in the back wearing the green. That's right, absolutely. You see on top, there's a picture of Deborah taking some of our young adult leaders to Israel, actually. And then you see our kids, our teenagers. You see a program called Life and Legacy, which is about the savings account of our community. We spend today at our checking account, and we save for the rainy day. And in the two bottom corners, Moishe House, it's a new organization in our community that we support, which is for post-college students to gather, and specifically in this case, in East Nashville, and a program called Violins of Hope. Well, a couple of years ago, this actually predates, I think, a number of us, but Harriet, who's on the call, was very involved in this, in a Holocaust education musical engagement with the broader community of Nashville. Next slide. So let's talk about a little bit of our institutions. For those of you who may or may not be familiar, the centerpiece of our community is our Gordon JCC. It's our campus, as you can see, our building, and it's got a lot of different stuff. It has athletics and fun with our swimming pool. It's got an early childhood center. It does BBY, I think that is BBYO. That's actually not BBYO, I'm sorry. That's actually one of their big fundraising night outs, an arts entertainment area. And finally, in the corner, that's our Holocaust memorial location. One of the next things that we do is education. Education we consider a silver bullet. So we have a K-6 day school at Kiva. We have a middle school. We actually have a Jewish high school starting in a year from now. And they're the bright, shiny, happy faces of the kids of our community. In fact, just yesterday, I was sitting with a member of our community at Starbucks at Green Hills Mall, and this young woman came up and said, "Are you Jewish?" And we said, "Of course, yes, we are." And she's a graduate of Akiva and very proud to be Jewish. And it makes our heart feel warm because we work to raise money to have things like Akiva, so we have proud young adult Jews. And that's the continuity that, of course, that Indigenous panel was talking about. And next is just a number of our we have 5 major synagogues in our community, ranging from Reform to Conservative to Orthodox. And for those of you who've never been in synagogue, what you see, I'm just going to point to the one on the left, Shereth Israel. And what you see in the middle there is the Ark. It's where the Torah scrolls are kept at any synagogue. And of course, the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, is our guiding light, is our law. And then we have a couple other organizations. We're active on campus, specifically Vanderbilt. We support college activities. And what you're seeing is a group of Vanderbilt students who are on a birthright tour to Israel. And then you have what's going on here is probably some holiday meal at the Vanderbilt Hillel Shulman Center. We believe, of course, like most other communities, food is a big part of how we celebrate. In fact, we were just talking yesterday about what latkes my family is going to make for upcoming Hanukkah. And Dawn, if you're lucky, we'll make some and we'll give them to you. Finally, is the caring part of our community. Jewish Family Service, like other family services, does counseling, does case management. Is one of the few, if not the only, organization in Nashville that does adoptions for same-sex marriage partners. It's intrinsic to have not only a community that is educated, that is connected Jewishly, but is also mentally healthy as well. And JFS is the center of that mental health for us. And now I'm going to pass over to Deborah, who's going to do a little Jewish trivia for everybody. And we're grading all of you. So whoever gets the most will get latkes.
Yeah, we thought just for fun, we do a little bit of a Jewish trivia, a few questions, a little bit of a game. And yes, there are prizes. So we will supply the gifts for those that can answer some of these questions. So we're going to show you an image, and you can just put in the chat if you know what it is, or you can put a thumbs up if you know what it is, or a surprised if you don't know what it is. Anyone know what I guess I can't see all. Let me go back to. Okay, so this is a mezuzah, and this is placed as you're entering a Jewish space. You'll see this on the right-hand side. So they can look lots of different ways. This is one example, but if you see something on the right-hand side as you're entering a space, most likely it is a Jewish space of some sort, either a Jewish home, a Jewish worship space, a Jewish congregational space. The mezuzah carries inside of it a piece of the Torah, the Old Testament, including the prayer called the Shema, which is the sort of central tenet of Judaism, which declares that there is only one God, that we have one God, and that we all are coming from the same God, from the same place. Okay, anyone know what these are?
I don't think I'm allowed to guess.
Yeah, I know, Abby, you may have a distinct advantage on this, but that's okay. These are Shabbat candles. So our day of rest is from Friday evening to Saturday evening. So our Sabbath is from Friday evening to Saturday evening. We celebrate it every week. We celebrate it by lighting candles, by drinking some wine, and by having a special bread called challah and a special family meal. In Jewish tradition, it really is the time that Jewish families really set aside to be together for the Friday night meal and into the day of rest on Saturday. And just as a reminder on that, so all Jewish holidays, because we follow a lunar calendar, all of our holidays are evening to evening. So when you're scheduling things and looking at calendars, just so you know, if there's a Jewish holiday, it may begin the night before. So it's a little tricky when scheduling for large groups of people, because you may have to see, it may be the night before a holiday. There are two holidays I'm going to call out and ask you to be really aware of, which are the Jewish holiday of Rosh Hashanah, the New Year in the fall, and the Passover Seder in the spring. Those are the two that are the sort of most essential to try to calendar around to not conflict with those that are celebrating those holidays. Okay. So this, anyone recognize that? So this is a Passover Seder plate. That word in the center, Pesach, is the Hebrew word for Passover. That's the ceremonial plate that we use during the Passover Seder with the different ceremonial items. And again, it is perhaps, for many Jews, it is the holiday that they are most likely to celebrate after Hanukkah. I guess maybe Hanukkah comes first, but for a lot of Jewish families, coming together for a Passover Seder is a very, very important tradition. And in our community here, we host, well, hopefully we're going to get back to hosting in person. The last couple of years, for obvious COVID reasons, it was virtual. We conduct a social justice Passover Seder right before the holiday, in a week or so before the holiday. So it's done. I'll go ahead and so the things on the Seder plate, I'll start with the egg because that's the easiest to identify. So there is an egg on this Passover Seder, and that, just like Easter eggs, it is a symbol of spring. It is a sign that we are entering spring and all that spring brings. The lettuce, also a symbol of spring and rebirth, green vegetable. Then that's the maror, the bitter herb, to remind us of the bitterness of slavery, because the Passover story is our story of coming from slavery into freedom, and the bitter herb is the reminder of the bitterness of slavery. Then the red also is another version of the bitter herb, so two different versions of that bitterness. The shank bone is the symbol of, in the story of Passover, the Jews put blood on the doorposts so that the angel of death would pass over the homes. And so that's the symbol of the shank bone. And then the last is the one before the egg, is called charoset. And that is a mixture, depending on where, and again, as Adam has indicated, Jews come from all over the world. So Jewish food represents every possible ethnic type of food you can imagine. So depending on which part of the world your family is from, that part of the Seder plate will be different. So for those that come from families from Eastern Europe, what we refer to as Ashkenazi Jews, it's usually apples and nuts and wine. And for those that come from more European, Sephardic Jews coming from Italy and Spain and those cultures, they use dried fruits often. So it really depends on where your family's heritage comes from, how you make their charoset, but they all symbolize the mortar that was used in the bricks that the Jewish slaves had to make to build as the story goes, that the Jews were making the bricks to build the pyramids. And so the charoset is the symbol of that mortar and the hard work that the slaves had to do.
You can even write in the chat if you can help with the reaction.
Yeah, it's fine. You can, yeah. So this is technically a Chanukiah. Some people refer to it as a menorah. This is a Chanukiah used for the holiday of Hanukkah, which celebrates religious freedom, the miracle of the oil and religious freedom. A menorah technically would only have 7 candles as opposed to 9. So the menorah, when someone talks about a menorah, they're often referring to this, but the distinction is in a menorah, it's the 7 for the 7 days of the week, and a Chanukiah has 9 for the 8 days of Hanukkah, plus the one that is a little higher is called a shamash, the helper. So that gets lit first, and then you light the other candles. So this is, and Hanukkah is similar to many faiths and many traditions. In fact, yesterday was Diwali, which is a similar holiday for on the Hindu calendar. The celebration of lights, the importance of lights in the winter and bringing light into our world. And so this is our version of that, but anyone who celebrates Christmas knows that Christmas lights are a major part of that celebration. Many different traditions have a celebration of light as the weather gets colder and darker. This is a fancy version of this.
I found one on the video.
Right. So this is a Hebrew word. This is a fancy version of it as a necklace, but the word is chai, which means life. And so you may have heard Jewish people say, oh, right, thank you, Abby, for reminding me. It symbolizes the number 18 in Hebrew letters also carry a numeric value. So the word chai equates to 18. So for Jews, the number 18 and all multiples of 18 are very, very important. And that's because it symbolizes life. And you may have been with Jewish folks out celebrating, and they will say l'chaim as they drink, instead of cheers, it's basically the Jewish version of cheers. So l'chaim means to life. And so drinking to life. So most of you have probably seen this symbol at some point. This is what we refer to as a Jewish star. It is on the flag of Israel, which Noam will speak about later. But actually, for those who are familiar with Buddhist tradition, it's also used in Buddhist tradition as the symbol of the connection of the above and below. And so it's that idea of connecting the world above with our world and the interplay between the two spaces. It's referred to as the Star of David, meaning King David, and it is also the symbol that's on the Israeli flag. So this is also one of those items that can come in lots of different shapes and sizes. You may see it in lots of different ways. This is called either a kippah in Hebrew or a yarmulke in Yiddish. Yiddish is the language that is the combination of Hebrew and German that many Eastern European Jews spoke. So in that culture, you would call it a yarmulke. In Hebrew, we refer to it as a kippah, and it's the head covering. For observant Jews, it's the head covering worn either all day, all the time, or during prayer celebration. So this is called a Torah. It is the scroll. It is literally, if you took the cover off and unwrapped it, it is actually a parchment scroll, and on it is written the entire 5 books of Moses, which often gets referred to as the Old Testament. So in Christian tradition, the Torah is referred to as the Old Testament. In our tradition, we call it the Torah, meaning the teaching, and it contains the 5 books of Moses. So it's the beginning of the story, beginning with the creation story, Adam and Eve. So if you unrolled this all the way open, the beginning of it would be the story of what we call Breshit, the creation story, the creation of the world, Adam and Eve, and it would go all the way through all 5 books and end with the death of Moses. We read it throughout the year, and at the end of the year, we have a big celebration for finishing reading the whole thing, and then we begin right again. On the same evening called the celebration of Torah, Simchat Torah, we both finish the reading, we read the very, very end of the story, and then come right back around to read the beginning of the story to symbolize the continuity of our lives and the world, that as soon as we finish reading it, we start reading it again. So the entire thing gets read through every single year. So this is let's see if anyone's ever seen this before. Again, this is also can come in lots of different shapes and sizes. This is called a grogger or a noisemaker. It's used on the holiday of Purim. Purim is the holiday where we read the book of Esther. It is also a symbol. It's sort of like a Jewish Mardi Gras. It comes at the same time of year, roughly, as Mardi Gras, and it's really a big celebration to celebrate that the Jews were not killed in the story, and that Queen Esther saves her people. So it's a celebration. The grog or the noisemaker is used in the story whenever the bad guy Haman is mentioned. We try to drown out his name. And a little factoid, the only time of year that Jews are commanded to get drunk, the commandment is that you are supposed to get so drunk that you can't distinguish between Mordecai, the good guy in the story, and Haman, the bad guy in the story. This also can look different ways. This is one of the symbols to show that a food is kosher, meaning permissible. So in Jewish tradition, certain foods are permissible and certain aren't, but depending on the tradition of which Jewish tradition you follow, this is irrelevant at this point. So as Adam said, we have several congregations in our community. We have Reform congregations, conservative congregations, modern Orthodox, and Chabad. And in Reform tradition, really all food is permissible. So these symbols would only be applicable for Jews that are either that are observant of the laws of kashrut. In general, most Jews stay away from pork and shellfish, but again, it really depends on the tradition you were raised. And in some Jewish traditions, there is no prohibition at all. All food is permissible, but in other Jewish traditions, there's a restriction on what is allowed to be eaten and what isn't allowed to be eaten. In modern times, there's now also something that they call eco-kosher, which means that it's not only that it be permissible by the original law of kashrut, but that it also be mindful of what's important for our ecology and our environment. So not using styrofoam plates, recycling things, sustainability, only eating fish that are sustainable, things like that. So eco-kosher is a standard that's relatively recent, and it takes into account both the Jewish tradition and also the environmental concerns. So I think that is the end of our game. We will tally up, and those that have been able to answer we will make sure that you get a prize. And so that's just sort of a fun little overview of some of the symbols and items that are important to Jewish tradition, to teach you just a little bit about what it means in our tradition. And with that, I think I am turning it over to Noam to speak a little bit about. I think we should go right in, Noam. Let's go right into the Israel piece. It's early still.
It was on the presentation, so we didn't know we prepared for any scenario. So, hi everyone. My name is Noam. As I said previously, I am the Israeli Shlicha, and I want to take you on a trip. We haven't traveled much in so long. We're going to take a trip to Israel, and feel free to, if you have any questions or if I ask anything, if you want to open the mic, it's all great. I want to ask you, and Adam and Deborah are not allowed to participate, Harriet as well. Where is Israel? Can you try to guess where it is? Well,
Again, I don't think I'm allowed to guess.
Okay, Abby, you want to tell us where Israel is?
I believe it's near Syria and Egypt.
You are correct. So let me just, so Israel is actually, I'm sorry, right here. So we're gonna take a trip even closer. So we move from Tennessee to Israel and we're getting closer. What do we see? We see here, welcome to the Middle East. And I think it's really important, I like using Google Maps just to give an overview on how it actually looks like. Still, you can see Israel right here. But interesting thing is that what we see around us. So these are all Arab countries around Israel. And this is actually where I live. So now that we know where Israel is, I want to show you more of a close-up on Israel. So we have Jerusalem, the capital, and Haifa, and we're going to get even closer. Even now you can see Jerusalem. I live right about here. We're going to see it really, really soon. My family lives here. And again, as the map shows, we have West Bank and the Gaza Strip right here. So we can all see it in our eyes. This is Israel. So before I'm going to jump into my story, I want to give you just a couple of facts about Israel that might surprise you, might not. So we have the flag. The colors are white and blue, and they're according to the colors of the talit. You can see the talit, the Jewish prayer shul, and the Star of David, as Deborah said, is in the middle, and it's a symbol of the Jewish people. Now, just a couple more facts. So the languages in Israel main languages are Hebrew, Arabic, and a fun fact is that every road sign or every sign that marks something in Israel is marked in Hebrew, Arabic, and English. So you will see it just a symbolization of the different cultures that we have in this really, really small country. Declaration of Independence was May 14, 1948. The government system is a democratic government. I did a couple of programs about Israel politics and how the Knesset works. So I would love to invite you to one of these. This is a whole other story. And the population, we have about 8.7 million in Israel. So a couple more fun facts. Of course, we have Gadot, our other shlicha in Hollywood. So we have about 43% of the world Jews living in Israel, according since in 2017. Israel banknotes have Braille on them, so the blind can identify them. There are approximately 186,000 Holocaust survivors living in Israel, and unfortunately, I think the numbers have lowered since 2016. My great-grandmother is a Holocaust survivor. In recent years, Tel Aviv has been consistently ranked as top international tourist destination for its culture, cuisine, nightlife, architecture, and large LGBTQ community. Tel Aviv is my favorite city. We can talk about it later. Israel has more museums per capita than any other country in the world. Israel is one of the world's leaders in the per capita number of scientists and technicians in the workspace with 140 there, 10,000 workers. I can go on and on about fun facts about Israel, but I hope this gave you a little bit of a taste of where we are and just a bit of basic facts. So now we're gonna zoom in and I'm gonna take you to my story. So I live in a city, as you can see, we have Tel Aviv. I live in a city called Modi'in Maccabim Re'ut, which actually, as Deborah said previously, the Hanukkah story actually happened 5 minutes drive from my house. We have archaeologists like sites there that shows very amazing parts of the story, which kind of blows my mind every time. So this is where I live. So I'm right between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. And this is my family. I think one of the things that I wanted to talk about, which I think it's important, is Israel is always called the melting pot. So many different cultures. And as we said, we come from different cultures, we have our different food. And I think this blend of different cultures makes us who we are. So I'm gonna start with my mom. My mom's parents came to Israel from Russia and Romania. And my grandmother's mom, she is a Holocaust survivor. So I heard a lot of stories from her when I was younger. And on my dad's side, it's actually really a funny blend because they came to Israel from Egypt, but they're Italian, but the Jewish community in Egypt spoke French. So it was a bit of a blend there. And from that different cultures came me and my sister. Like our family, so many of my friends from so many different parts of the world, and every Israeli looks a bit different or have different traditions. I can tell you that in this picture, they're actually my best friend, that they will be very happy to be in this presentation. But in this picture, we have Israelis from France, Ethiopia, India, Russia, Ukraine, Yemen, Iraq, Morocco, Britain, so many different places. And I think the diversity of cultures just makes it so special. And I think one of the things as an Israeli is, I know it sounds very upfront sometimes, but when you meet a new person, you always ask, oh, so where are you from? And Israelis won't say from like Modi'in or Tel Aviv. They're gonna say, oh, yeah, my family lives in Jerusalem, but I am from Egypt and a bit of Italian and a bit of this and a bit of that. And it's just really cool. So if you get a chance to go to Israel, ask people where they're from and what's their story, because every story is really interesting. And I wanted to end this Israel portion, because I can go on and on, with the term Zionism. And I'm gonna read it. Oh, I am sorry. Okay. Zionism is a Jewish national movement of self-determination in the land of Israel, the historical birthplace and biblical homeland of the Jewish people. It's an ideal definition. And before we're moving forward, I want to give a chance, I don't know if you can see me, but I want to give a chance for you to ask questions or give your opinion. What do you think about the term Zionism, and if you ever seen it before? I'm gonna stop here for a second so I can see your faces.
I have heard the term before. I wasn't really clear what it meant because a lot of times it's presented in context of some type of conflict. So it is nice to know what the actual definition is.
Thank you, Miriam.
Well, and Miriam, it's a great point because many people, and we can talk about this more, take Zionism, make Zionism what it isn't. And most of the time, like in a lot of, a lot of topics, critical race theory is a great example, right? Ask someone, right, there was someone polled in Virginia, I don't like critical race theory. What is it? I don't know, but I don't like it, right? And I'll vote against it. What is Zionism? Zionism is for me, for a lot of us, it's the love of Israel. It's not a political issue. It is the love of the land, right? And we can, and Jews are smart enough and able enough to separate their love of the land and the country and the people and the food and the beaches and the this and the that from anything that's going on in the government. And we'll talk about it more, but there are people who assume that just because you're Jewish and because you're Zionist, that somehow you unconditionally love whatever's going on in Israel. First, Israelis don't unconditionally love what's going on in Israel, right? And so to assume that all of us do, there's a joke that every Jewish person on this call knows, which is 3 Jews, 4 opinions. And when it comes to Israel, it's 3 Jews, 9 opinions. Walk down the street in Israel. No one knows this more than anyone else. Walk down the street, read 5 newspapers. 35 different op-ed voices in 5 newspapers, and they all are saying something different, and they're all saying something critical of Israel, and they all love Israel simultaneously.
And I will just add to Adam, just the fact that on any program that I'm doing, if it's a discussion or, first of all, it's a safe space. Everybody can say whatever they want. As you say, Miriam, I'm here to listen. And I think as an Israeli, I have criticism about stuff that's happening in my home and my government. And I don't have to agree on anything, but I think that the point of right to exist and the fact that 43% of Jewish people live in Israel, I think that's the Zionism for me. And I'm gonna go back to the presentation. If you have any additional questions, or I would love to get a coffee if you would like to talk about Israel even further. Thank you for being patient with my English, with a coffee, before coffee in the morning. And I will go back to Adam with the presentation. Oh, this is Adam or Deborah?
Well, I thought if we wanted, I thought we might take just a little break. It's for if anyone needs to stretch, get a cup of coffee. And then Dawn, would it be okay if we come back in 3 or 4 minutes? We could, I don't know if you want to.
That would be great.
Is that all right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's plan to come back. It's by my clock, it's, let's plan to come back at 10. So take a short stretch break and we'll come back at 10 and we'll go more into anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. Okay, Don, I think we are, we'll continue on with the presentation. So this is a word that many of you may have seen, and similar to when we were talking about Zionism, may be a word that you do or don't exactly know what it means. So is there anyone on the call that wants to put in the chat what they think this word means, anti-Semitism? Or even if you've heard the word or not, if you've even just heard the word.
I don't know the full definition myself. I've always wondered if it's an aversion to beliefs other than your own, or is it Jewish specific?
So that's a very good point. And someone, Miriam put in the chat, the hate of Jewish people. And that, Miriam, that is as good a definition as there is. So Noam, if you want to go to the next slide, we're going to share the, the sort of what the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, which is a certain perception of Jews, which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, towards Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. So, but in its essence, really it comes down to Jew hatred. And it's a term that was coined in Germany because they found around in the late 1800s, because using the German word for Jew hatred was considered too offensive. So they didn't want to actually call it the German word for Jew hatred. So instead, they coined this term anti-Semitism, coming from Semitic, the idea of Semitic people, which is that whole region. So it's not really anti the Semitic people so much as it is really specifically related to Jew hatred. So Miriam, that's really exactly what it means. Is anti-Semitism is just sort of a fancy word for Jew hatred. So many of you have probably heard that sadly the incidence of Jew hatred is on the rise, similar to, unfortunately, so many other versions of hatred that are on the rise: racism, anti-Asian rhetoric, anti-LGBT rhetoric. There's, sadly, we are living in a world where so much of this is so much more at the surface. Obviously, a lot of these issues have been under the surface forever, but in the last few years, they really have come much more public and much more on the and anti-Blackness, exactly. So all of those issues have risen over the last few years, including Jew hatred. So these are just a few examples of some local examples of this national trend. So in the corner, that yellow star that says not vaccinated. So the yellow star was the symbol used in Nazi Germany to identify Jews. It was a symbol used basically to make sure that they were killed. I mean, the Nazis wanted not just to control the Jews, they literally wanted to exterminate the Jews. And the yellow star was the symbol so that Jews had to be identified so that people knew who was Jewish and who wasn't. Sadly, the anti-vax community has taken it on as a symbol of, I'll be honest, I still don't exactly see the connection, but it's a really offensive, for those of us in the Jewish community, it's really offensive to see a symbol that we see as so painful and that marked us for death to be used in a political way. To take a symbol like that and make it so grossly political is really problematic. And unfortunately, a lot of our national leaders have been using Nazi terminology in relationship to COVID-19. And it's just a sad, painful experience. This happened locally at a store locally, and it actually came to light on a Saturday, which is, as I've already said, our day of rest. So most of us as Jewish professionals were, in our day of rest, not really paying attention to email and things like that. When it was announced that this local store was selling these badges, through social media, there was just this sort of social media come together. There was a very organically organized protest at the store for people standing up as our allies to say, we don't want this in our city. We don't want Nashville to be the symbol of this sort of hate. So that's the yellow star representation. The
Deborah,
other,
can I just jump in for 1 second? You know, it's interesting. These people think that they're using this somewhat in solidarity. The only time that non-Jews have worn the Star of David was during the Holocaust in Denmark, for example, where the King of Denmark implored Danish citizens, non-Jews, to wear the Star of David so that the Nazis couldn't tell the difference between who was and who wasn't Jewish. But they wore the Star of David to save Jews in solidarity. So this is why when Deborah points out, we see this as offensive. They're not doing this in solidarity with the plight of Jews. They're doing this for their own political reasons. And that is why we find this so massively offensive.
yes, thank you. Thank you, Adam. So the next picture with the banner that reads "Kikes lie, whites die." Kikes, of course, is a very derogatory term for Jews. The 1488 relates to Hitler. This is a particular white supremacist group that is in line with neo-Nazis. This was taken, they posted this banner on our Nashville Holocaust Memorial. So where you're seeing this picture, they put that sign on. The stones behind it are literally the names of Jews who were killed in the Holocaust, and they put this sign on it. So you can only imagine the pain and disgust it caused to our community. And this happened maybe a year ago, Adam, not that long. I mean, really fairly recently. This is not something that's historic. This is something that is happening currently. The bottom one is scribbles that are at school. So in my role as community relations director, we have organized a reporting form for families. There were so many families Jewish families whose children were experiencing anti-Semitism in schools and versions of Jew hatred at school, that we have created this reporting form to try to collate all of that data. Sadly, we launched it at the beginning of September. We've also already had a very good number of reports across 3 different counties. We've had anti-Semitic reporting from Wilson County, from MNPS, and from Williamson County. I will give a shout out to MNPS though. When it happened at the school in MNPS and in metro schools in Nashville, they right away were open to engaging with us, to having education, to working. They understood the importance of addressing it. Sadly, Williamson County and Wilson County were having a harder time making that case. They do not seem to be wanting to take it as seriously as Nashville was willing to take it, and it is happening on a daily basis. Jewish children in school being confronted with swastikas, Heil Hitler. Yes, thank you. Yeah, absolutely, Dawn. Shout out to Ashford Hughes. Yes, they are doing a great job in confronting these sorts of issues across the board for all students, whatever their background. They really want to make the metro schools as warm and welcoming and inclusive as possible. And I can only hope that at some point we can get Wilson and Williamson County on board to that philosophy. So this is just as one of many representations of Jew hatred in social media, which is how this is particularly being spread. There is a huge, just daily, just a barrage of Jew hatred symbols and memes and images on social media. So again, just to show that sadly, anti-Semitism, Jew hatred is really, I don't know if it's on the, like I said, it has always existed, but it has become way more public, and almost on some level, it's almost feeling like it's become more acceptable in a way, that it doesn't get the same negative pushback as before. And I think that, again, I think that's true for a lot of these issues that we're facing, not just within the Jewish community, but with all different minority communities, that there's an emboldenedness to it. There's almost this feeling like it's okay to, you know, all the anti-Asian hate that happened earlier this year, that somehow people just, I think it used to be you could shame people. And I find that in a lot of these situations now, you can't shame people in the same way. And so it's much more difficult to address this and to get people to understand how damaging this is to our, not just to us in the Jewish community, but how damaging this is to a civil society. Okay, so this is sort of the classic one. This is that image, this particular drawing of the quote unquote greedy Jew, Jews are in control of the world, Jews control everything. Again, we are less than, in terms of the world population, I think we're not even a full percent. In America, we're barely 2%. So, but still this idea that somehow this very tiny group, we are a very, very tiny minority, but somehow there is this perception that we rule the world, that we are in control of everything, and anything bad that happens is because it can be blamed on the Jews. And this comes back to something called the Elders of Zion, from the late 1800s, which was the first of this idea of blaming the Jews for everything wrong in the world. And some have said now, some of the academics who study social media and specifically disinformation campaigns and propaganda, they call the Elders of Zion the original propaganda for disinformation. It was the first really organized campaign to specifically identify a group of people and blame as scapegoats, to blame everything on the Jews. And sadly, this one is, it harkens back to it, but this is a current thing on social media. This image was pulled off social media currently. So it's that same propaganda of that the Jews control everything, and so therefore the Jews are to blame for everything, that persists even today. This is a short film. So this is Deborah Lipstadt. Deborah Lipstadt is perhaps considered the foremost authority on dealing with anti-Semitism. She has several books. If you by chance saw the movie Denial, that was her story in which she was accused of libel by one of the Holocaust deniers. So we'll go ahead. This is a like a 2-minute video of her explaining why Holocaust denial is so such a problem.
When someone comes up with a claim that is way out of the mainstream, I go on the offensive. Where's your evidence? Where's your proof? I try to hold their feet to the fire as much as I can. Prove it to me. Sometimes we often talk about facts and opinions. I want to offer a different construct. Facts, opinions, lies. They want to take their lie, dress it up as an opinion, maybe an edgy opinion. But once it's an opinion, they want to enter the conversation and encroach on the facts.
Yeah.
In their essence, Holocaust deniers are two things. They're neo-Nazis, but they have shed any outward connection to Nazism. So if you go to their gatherings, you won't see swastika-like banners. You won't see people giving the Sieg Heil salute. Instead, you'll find people nicely dressed, looking very academic, giving footnote-laden papers, reading from journals. And this is not just deniers. This is many far extreme fringe groups. But if you look underneath, it's the same anti-Semitism, racism, prejudice that you would have found in a neo-Nazi group, except now it parades as rational discourse. Social media, of which I'm a great fan, has to a certain degree flattened the difference between established fact and someone's wacky ideas or pure lies. It's forced those of us who care about truth, and I think most people do care to get the true story, to be much more on the offensive in terms of what we read, what we believe, and what we repeat. It's a super highway of information, but it comes with certain danger signs, and we have to be wary of those and react against them. We've got to be responsible. We've got to create a healthy skepticism.
So I think what that short video highlights is the damage of propaganda and the blurred lines that we find ourselves in between factual evidentiary-based truth versus just opinion parading as truth. So the difference between factual evidence-based truth versus just, this is my opinion and I say it's true. And social media, as Deborah says, has really allowed it to spread so much more quickly than it ever had been able to spread before. And it is this propaganda, partially related to anti-Semitism, but I think related to climate change and COVID-19, so many different things, that is really damaging our civil discourse, because it's harder and harder to even agree on the factual evidence that we may have difference of opinion of what you do with the problem, but we're now faced with an additional challenge of even articulating what the problem is, because depending on people's opinion, they're coming at it from a completely different way. And QAnon and other sources like that have just allowed a spread of real falsehood, just absolute, unsubstantiated information that then becomes somehow ingrained that people think that it's true. And so we encourage everyone to really use your critical thinking, and not just because you see something on social media, that does not make it factual, that does not make it an evidentiary based fact, and that we all have to do our due diligence, that if we see something on social media, to not just automatically assume that it's correct, but to do a little bit of our own digging to make sure before we share it, before we continue to spread it, that we make sure that we know what it is, where it's coming from, what it's designed to do before going ahead. And because it's so easy on social media to just post it, share it, put it out there. I'm calling upon all of us who want to have a civil discourse to be more careful about what we are sharing and how we are sharing it. Also, just as Deborah Lipstadt has been nominated to serve, there's a position within the federal government on anti-Semitism that actually carries the rank of ambassador. She has been nominated, and we hope that her nomination will go through so that that position is filled. It's an important national role. So Eric Ward is perhaps if you have not heard of Eric Ward or read any of his writing, I highly encourage you to seek out some of what he has written and done, because he is perhaps the foremost authority on connecting the dots between white nationalism, white supremacy, with anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, and Black hatred. That the core of that white nationalist movement is Jew hatred, and from that Black hatred and other hatreds, but the core of it dates back to, as I said, the Elders of Zion. It goes back to that disinformation propaganda campaign in which Jews are considered the cause of all bad things, and that's what comes into the current what we're currently seeing through white nationalist movements. And it is there that it is the relationship between all the different versions of hatreds, how all of them are used within the white nationalist movement. So this is one of many of his quotes. And again, I encourage you to read some of his writing. White nationalism, which emerged in the wake of the 1960s civil rights struggle and descends from white supremacism, is a revolutionary social movement committed to building a whites-only nation, and anti-Semitism forms its theoretical core. We are at the base of that movement, and from there spreads all the other hatreds, and in that, we need to be partnered in confronting this in our society. And Eric Ward is a terrific resource on this sort of information.
Well, it's why we believe that anti-Semitism is what some people call the canary in the coal mine, right? It's the sign of the growing intolerance and uncivility or incivility of a community. And I want to mention something that just happened a couple of days ago, really leads in to what Deborah said about how this has become so normal. At a Chandler, Arizona school board meeting, a woman got up, who's not even a parent in the school system, got up and started commenting about vaccinations and how all your money is going to drug companies. And then she said, to paraphrase, and if you want to get racist, it's all about the Jews. So I'm not sure how the Jews and drug prices come together, except maybe the Sackler family, which I think a lot of us would like to disown anyway. But what's really sad is that when she said this, people applauded. And worse, the person who was the school board meeting leader didn't say, that's wrong, that's offensive, that's bigoted, that's racist. She said, well, what you just said is not relevant to the conversation. So she didn't call it out, she didn't admonish it, and people were okay with what she said. So these are just some images that we're going to get into, because we're going to lead into what we call the new anti-Semitism, as if anti-Semitism itself has kind of gone away. The new one is the blurring between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. And I agree, Don, we need to call it out. We need to absolutely put up our hand and say, stop. That is wrong. That is hatred in any form, whatever that is. I agree with you. And so, you could go on YouTube and you can Google Chandler, Arizona school board meeting. It's just from a couple of days ago, and it's horrific. But we've seen this before. We saw in a school board meeting, I don't know where it was in the country, of a high school student talking about vaccinations and his grandmother, right? And he got heckled, right? He got heckled. And the only reason why the Williamson County School Board meeting, the second one, was so peaceful is because there were 10 police officers there. Not because people had probably changed their behavior, because they were fearful of the law. Sad comment. So let's get into this, and let's go into the next slide, Noam. We have, this is the modern definition of anti-Zionism: prejudice against the Jewish movement for self-determination and the right of the Jewish people to a homeland in the state of Israel. And let me put it this way: the right of the Jewish people to a homeland, and I would add, like any other group, like Palestinians, like Basques, like Catalonians, like Canadians, like Americans, like French Canadians, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. Great. Next slide, please. So there's a 3D test. Anton Sharinsky is an incredibly famous Jewish figure. He was a scientist in the Soviet Union who wanted to emigrate to Israel with his wife and was not allowed. And he was kept in confinement. He was kept for some 30 years, I believe, an incredibly long period of time, separated from his wife until he was considered, like many, what they call a refusenik, right? He refused to give in to the Soviet Union. He was also refused to allow to move to Israel. Finally, when the public pressure came, so finally the Soviet Union gave in. He was allowed to move. He's become a major thought figure in Jewish life, and he's come up with a 3D test. Demonization of what someone says. Does it demonize Israel? Does it delegitimize Israel? Does it subject Israel to double standards? Next slide. So this is the demonization, refers to the portrayal of certain groups as evil, demonic, or satanic, right? Frequently charges Jews with conspiring to harm humanity, often to blame Jews for why things go wrong. Next slide. Right, and so here's a comment from Ilhan Omar. She's criticizing a pro-Israel lobby group for interfering in foreign policy, and she's saying it's all about the Benjamins. It's all about the money. And when I or Noam or Deborah, I'm sure I'm going to speak for Harriet at this moment, because I see her finally on screen. Thanks to see you, Harriet. That what we're hearing is that Jews and money, and Jews have money, Jews control money, and they're able to control other things because of it in a nefarious way for our own interests. Ilhan Omar wasn't making a comment about lobby groups in general. She was making a very specific comment about a pro-Israel lobby group, a legal pro-Israel lobby group, right? And it's somewhat demonic control of US foreign policy. It's all about the Benjamins and how we control the Benjamins and how we use it for our purposes, our nefarious purposes to harm the United States. Delegitimization, right? The denial of the Jewish people's right to self-determination by claiming that the existence of the state of Israel is a racist endeavor. Now, a lot of people will say that Israel is a colonial adventure, right? That we're not indigenous. You know, we help pay for Jewish college students around the country to go on a program called Birthright, to go to Israel, to celebrate their birthright, because we believe we didn't colonize Israel. We didn't colonize part of the Middle East, that this was part of our 5,000-year-old heritage found in the words of the Torah, that the pledge from God to Abraham at the end of the day. And that when you know, at the very end of the Torah that Deborah talks about, Moses looks over to the land of Israel as the land that God has promised the Israelites. And we as Jews are the modern day Israelites, because we are the successors of that community that wandered in the desert finally to go home. And so we didn't suddenly show up in Israel and as if something new. This is something that is part of our birthright at the end of the day. And what's interesting is the term racist, for example, which is that you know, Noam showed a really interesting slide early on about the state of Israel that are really a couple interesting things. One, there are 21% of the Israeli population is Arab Israeli. They are full citizens of the state of Israel. Israel is not a perfect country. I wouldn't think anybody on this call would say otherwise, but there are Arab citizens that are full citizens of Israel, and they take part in all of Israeli society, including voting for the government. And this government, the current government in Israel, has four or five members of an Arab party as part of its government at the end of the day. And for example, the Israeli national soccer team, some of its leading players are Arab Israelis. So there you go. Next slide, please. So delegitimization also is in this form. You hear this lots of, right? Palestine from river to the sea. Well, the river is the river is the Jordan River, and the sea is the Mediterranean. And if you have a Palestine from river to the sea, then you also don't have a state of Israel. Most Jews, most Israelis will say that Israel should live in a state of security, in an existence of security, and so too alongside a Palestinian state. That one does not mean the absence of the other. But what we hear a lot is that Palestine only exists as a Palestinian state from the river to the sea without the existence of the state of Israel, saying that Jews do not have a right, to their self-determination, but only Palestinians do. And if someone's going to make the case that Palestinians should have the right to their own homeland, but not to say the Jews shouldn't have the right to their own homeland, that is what we consider a double standard. Next. And here's the double standard. So earlier this year, Ben & Jerry's ice cream decided to stop selling ice cream in the West Bank. And they would say this because they have problems with Israeli policies in the West Bank. Having a problem with an Israeli policy is perfectly legitimate and is not anti-Zionist. But let's look at the interview that Ben of Ben & Jerry had, right? So he was asked about the value system in Ben & Jerry's, right? And how they also don't agree with what's going on in Texas with the abortion law and in Georgia with respect to voting laws. What is Ben's reply? I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting question. I don't know what that would accomplish. So here's Ben & Jerry making a stand against policies in Israel, but they're not making a stand against what's going on in Texas or what's going on in Georgia or what's going on in Russia, or what's going on in China. So I bet if I flew to Dallas today, I would find Ben & Jerry's being sold in a grocery store in Dallas. If you're going to comment about the policies of one because of your value system, what we ask is to not have a double standard. If you're going to make a comment about one country's policies, then you should say the same thing about someone else and have the same action. And what's really interesting is I'm not sure anything will come of. I'm pretty sure, without knowing conclusively, that the state of Israel isn't going to change its policies because of Ben & Jerry. So here's a guy saying, well, if we don't sell ice cream in Dallas, it probably won't make a difference to what's going on there. As if somehow he thinks that that's the standard there, but it's not the standard with respect to Israel. Again, we would like one standard, not a double standard, and not a hypocritical standard. Next slide. We want to end this section with this. This is a terrifying situation that Deborah brought up to us. Except there were women at the University of Vermont who were survivors of sexual assault, a horrific moment in the life of any person. And yet they weren't welcome. Their allegation of sexual assault were dismissed, not because it didn't happen, but because they were Jewish. And people linked their Judaism to their love of Israel and said, therefore, because of this, you don't have the right to be a sexual assault victim that we should care about. That there were people at this university who believed that their politics were more important than caring for someone who was a sexual assault victim. You have to ask yourself, who does this? Who puts their issues with a country, whatever that country, ahead of a sexual assault? Can we imagine this person saying to someone who's Chinese, well, because you're Chinese, and maybe because of what goes on in China with the Communist Party, that we're not going to accord you the status of being a sexual assault victim? Unbelievable. But these are the sad sign of the times, which gets us to the next slide. What comes next? How do we get to the point, and Dawn makes a point, where we are comfortable standing up, where not only we stand up, but other people feel comfortable standing up and making sure that this society is tolerant and accepting and full of civil and civic discourse and behavior. Next slide. Because we truly believe that if it doesn't go that way, this is what's going to happen. It's a famous quote from Pastor Niemöller, who said, well, I wasn't a socialist, so I didn't stand up for them. I wasn't a trade unionist, so I didn't stand up for them. I wasn't a Jew, so I did not stand up for them. And then they came for me. And there was nobody left to stand up for me because they were all gone already, right? You know, we have a quote, a famous quote by one of our great theologians, Hillel, said, if I'm not for myself, who will be? Who will be for me? If I'm only for myself, then who am I? There is a constant understanding in Jewish thought and in Jewish life that we don't act only for ourselves. Next slide. So here's just a couple of ideas that certainly I've come up with, but this is where we'd love to hear people's discussion about steps towards a more tolerant, accepting, inclusive, inviting, belonging society, right? Enhance your knowledge about the Holocaust and other atrocities. Darfur, Sudan, Armenia, right? What's going on? What has gone on in Haiti? The Holocaust can be and should be a spark to learning about other atrocities, other ethnic atrocities across the world. I would always suggest for people to visit the Nashville Public Library Civil Rights Museum. What an amazing place to learn about civil rights and the civil rights movement in our community. Visit a religious entity different than your own and ask questions. I remember, was it a couple years ago, Deborah, that we were invited to a mosque, right? And we were able to watched their prayer service, and then we engaged in dialogue with them. What a fantastic for coming together event. Teach your children, help encourage others to teach their children about other cultures. Familiarity, I don't believe, breeds contempt. Familiarity breeds inclusivity and engagement. And then we should all try to model respect, right? This woman in Chandler clearly didn't model respect. And the people who clapped clearly didn't model respect. And what's worse, the head of the meeting didn't model respect as well, because she let this happen and she didn't say anything after the fact, right? I was teaching a group of grade sixers many years ago, and I lived in England, about Judaism and Jewish life. And I was told after the fact that 3 boys in the back, unbeknownst to me, they didn't do a very good job, pitched pennies on the floor. It was the whole, what about the Benjamins, the cheap Jew, the money-grubbing Jew, right? I don't blame these grade 6 kids. They weren't born with a racist bone in their back. They weren't born anti-Semitic. They modeled that behavior from someone else in their life. And they thought that it was acceptable because someone else made that acceptable at the end of the day. Why did I spend 4 days a year, 3 years in a row at a public school in England talking about Judaism, Jewish life? So that we could start these conversations of tolerance and acceptance and welcoming and belonging. And it
thanks,
starts.
Adam. Thank you for that. And I also, Don has posted some very good words for us to think about. And I also think we want to open this now for some interaction, conversation about the Jew hatred that we've presented, but the broader societal questions that it raises. And so Don has posted the words inclusive, informed, intentional. And I think that gives us a good start to this conversation. And at this point, we would like to just open it to any comments, questions, thoughts about anything related to Jew hatred specifically, but really the broader question of how do we create the society that we really want to live in and be in valuable, informed relationships with others. Or even if you have a personal experience of something where you either on the positive or the negative, where something happened that really made you feel respected, included, and welcomed, or the converse, where for whatever reason you didn't feel that way because of a personal experience.
I went to Belmont, which is a traditionally Christian university, but we started like a little group of Jewish students who we went to all of Vanderbilt's events together as much as we could. Vanderbilt welcomed us with open arms, and I was so excited to bring some people together for that. But it was so interesting going to Belmont because I welcome questions. I've received so many questions. I would love people to ask me with an open mind and an open heart about my experiences. But what was so interesting at the same time is how much people don't know. It's just because I was lucky enough to grow up learning about the world religions as much as my curriculum would allow, and just like understanding backgrounds besides my own. And it's just so interesting to me that people will grow up just not learning about experiences other than their own so much, One of my favorite classes in college was a world religion class. And my teacher she was in the ministry, she was a professor in the ministry school, but she taught, I was in the honors program, and she themed it personal narrative. So we read books about why people came to believe what they believe, why people took the actions that they chose to take. And one of our projects was, again, going to a religious organization other than our own and sitting in their service and learning. I did Greek Orthodox. And that was one of the most powerful experiences that I'm so grateful I got to have.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else have a personal experience or a story they'd like to share, or a question, comment about anything that we've shared already this morning?
I know I'm participating, but I can share a small example. In my free time, I dance salsa and I go to Plaza Mariachi. And if you've been there, it's great. It's great. And I was hosting shlichim that did doing the same work as I do all around the US and around the world. And it's their first time and they're very shy. And the first one, I encouraged them to invite someone and they inviting them and they started dancing and suddenly they're stopping. And I asked her why. And she said, oh, he asked me where I'm from and he just left in the middle of the dance. And she was a bit shocked, even though we're doing this work and we're knowing the outcome of people thinking Israel is a controversial place and a misunderstood place. And that was a bit of a shock to me. And if I would have approached it now, I will go to him and tell him, hey, this is my email. Let's talk about it. Like, and listen to him. But that's another example.
Anyone else have something to share or questions about anything that's been presented?
Anyone ever been in a... I think you just cut somebody off.
Oh.
Has anyone ever been in one of these moments we've talked about where someone has said something that they weren't sure that it crossed the line, but because they were shocked that they were shocked at what they heard, they didn't feel comfortable saying something in response, or were so shocked that by the time they felt like saying something, the moment had passed?
I was going to say, I can. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So, hi, everyone. This is a very close to my heart topic with regards to inclusion and being informed and intentional and just kind of being able to accept everyone for who they are, regardless of where they come from or what they believe in. And we had an experience where my son and I were in a scouting activity, and we were in a group, in a car ride, and some of the conversations that took place were about the different countries of the people that were in the car, and so my son shared that he has Colombian heritage from South America, and so a lot of the kids, were American kids raised here, and that have not really traveled much, and so they just didn't have much information about Colombia other than what they hear in the news. And oftentimes what you hear in the news is mostly the negative, because it's what brings in the numbers for those ratings. And so the subject and the topic became all about the cartels and drugs and cocaine and thieves and bad people, and when that's a small percentage of Colombia, and that is not the case now, as badly as it used to be, but it is the narrative, and it is the topic, and it is the perception that most people get, or most people would assume about Colombia and the country itself, is the drugs and the cartels and the danger and the but they don't think of the agriculture, of the food, of the forest, of the roses, coffee, emeralds, all these exports, and all this other wonderful, amazing, Gabriel Garcia Marca, is just one of the most famous, pretty amazing author. And so it was sad because my son was trying to bring up those other subjects and those points, but everyone in the car, all the kids, were just focused on the bad. And couldn't see beyond that. And so it was difficult for me to try to, at that moment, I just kind of froze. I didn't know, I was just, and he felt so badly about it afterwards. And so it was difficult to try to have this understanding and let these people, these kids know that there's more to that, and that perhaps is not the best thing, or you don't win the most friends by pointing out the negative about that person's heritage or background, right? So just about education, being informed, and kind of not necessarily bringing up the worst of a race or our country or our religion when you're around people, just being mindful. But this again, were kids, they were teenagers, right? So they don't know better, but they could know better. That's kind of where all ended.
I think it's just so, oh, sorry, did I cut someone? I just wanted to say that I truly relate to your story, and it just astonished me how it happens in different cultures, and it all starts with education and us wanting to learn. And I messaged Dawn, and I want to learn more about what you're doing. But yeah, I think it's all about the education and wanting to learn new cultures. And I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's a difficult, painful story, and nobody wants to be treated as a stereotype. I think that's part of it, is that we are all individuals. We all bring to our world our own uniqueness, and to be just dismissed and dehumanized based on one aspect is painful. It's painful for all of us. And so thank you for sharing that story. I'm going to just share a very small technique that I sometimes find helpful in these situations when you are, because it is shocking. I mean, when someone confronts you like that, even if they don't mean to be confrontational, it feels like an assault. One technique I have found to be somewhat effective is to just ask questions with a genuine curiosity. That's interesting. Why do you think that about Colombia? Where did you learn that about Colombia? How do you know that? I find that to be sometimes an effective tool to engage in a conversation so that it isn't just a complete shock. Just by virtue of just asking the person like where they're getting the information or how they learned it can sometimes soften the conversation just enough to actually have a more valuable engagement than just a stereotypical engagement.
Thank you so much for that. That's so very helpful.
Anyone else? Either a personal experience or a perspective about anything that we've been sharing, how we build these kinds of communities that we want to live in that are respectful of each other's humanity and personal experience.
I was just going to add that, it's funny that I sit in these community conversations, and well, before that, thank you all for your narratives, your voice, your information, your heart, and your dedication to getting the word out, because I think that's a big start and a big place. Because what I have found convening with the different affinity groups is that we have become so comfortable living invisibly in our spaces. And I think it's really important for us to call this stuff out and to realize that at the center of this is a justice issue. And it's a racial issue, which crosses so many different planes, so many different people, so many different thoughts. And, unfortunately, the story that was mentioned about, living in the stereotypes, every group, every religion, every type of person has at least one stereotype that's negative that people would love to paint you with. And I really think this is the beginning of a lot of work that we need to do individually and collectively to address those problems. And so I had shared in the chat that, I'm thankful that my daughter kind of had what I would consider a very white experience. And
That's where we got our Jewish experience from her friends there. But even in living through her and learning through her and her friends and their families, we still were very disconnected. And I would love to see all people, especially of Nashville, you talk about just like Tel Aviv, having a super melting pot here, be able to exchange and live and co-create in spaces like this. Like, to me, there should be 200, 300 people on this call today, because there's so much that we don't know about the Jewish living, Jewish community, Jewish lives, Jewish struggles. And what we will find is if we lean in and listen, we will realize we have a lot of the same issues. And then it becomes, what are we going to do about it? So unfortunately, growing up, I did hear a lot of anti-Semitism type crap going on. That's exactly what it was. And as a child, I didn't know what it was. I just knew it felt different. And so when we think about neuroscience, the fight, flight, or freeze, a lot of times people are always fleeing and freezing. And so to Adam's question, you know, has there been a time when you could have said something and maybe the moment passed? Sometimes we're processing. And I've been in that processing moment, like, wait a minute, what are you trying to say? Even that whole Jewish dollar, that whole being tight with money and this whole facade, it's crazy. It is crazy that we are still allowing this type of stuff to happen. So I appreciate the information, because now I realize I too have to call out more stuff if I hear it again. Now I know how to respond. And love the fact that, Deborah, you mentioned the power of a question. When you ask people questions, you disarm them of their ignorance. And I love it. Thank you so much. And I'm done.
You know, Don, you say something really so spot on before, which is, I wish there were 200, 300 people on this call. And you know, I've been on some of these CUNY conversations where we've had, you know, probably 10, 15 people. You know, I guess the question is, and I'm not expecting you to have an answer right away, this is a collective question. How do we get 200, 300 people to be engaged in these conversations? Because we all know, you know, 15 people is great, 30 people is better, 40, 50, you know, the more people around these tables collectively is going to be great for us. And you know, I'm only 3 years in Nashville, so, you know, what do I know? But the question is, how do we get many more people who, we have to think there are 300 people who want to live in a more engaged, inclusive, belonging society. You know, how do we get those people out? I mean, we had a few people at the Indigenous event. Would have been great to have more. I mean, I was so happy that I was able to be there for the period that I was. I just don't know how we get more that table, so that we are saying to ourselves, wow, you know, this auditorium just isn't big enough, right? That's, you know, if the greatest problem we have is we don't have enough room, that's my question, and I don't have an answer. I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, Adam, you're spot on. The thing is to start doing it. So I've been in this position since April. And part of my directive as a director is to have 4 to 5 conversations a year. We've already had 8 this year, and we have 27 scheduled for next year. And so what it is to build the momentum. I'm a grassroots girl. I'm East Nashville native. I didn't have the life that my children have, right? I one generation removed from public housing, and continuing to move and build as I go. So, you know, that's my story, that's my thing. And what I'm going to do is we're going to continue to have these conversations. So I see us at the Curb Event Center having a conversation with you and Deborah on the stage next to my LGBTQIA plus community leaders and my Black folk community leaders, and my bringing our own communities to the space to say, hey, y'all, we're all doing the same thing and talking about the same crap. And then also bringing the majority in and say, hey, we need you to dismantle what you created, period. I can't do it, Adam. You can't do it, but all of us together will do it. So we're going to work on it, Adam.
Well, I think, I speak for Deborah since she's nodding her head. We'd be at that table in a heartbeat. Create it. We'll help you set it up. We'd even provide, we have the JCC. We have a lovely space that we would, with lots of free parking, lots of free and easy parking, which I
love
always,
JCC.
and we would be there in a heartbeat to help set that up and to be a part of those conversations to further this dialogue.
And you will be at the table, Adam, because we're building that puppy right now. So I look for you and others. Everyone on this call is invited. Randy, you too. Hello. So now that we have your email, when you see these things pop up, just pop on in, because I need you in all the spaces. When there's a conversation in LGBTQ land, or if there's a conversation around health disparities, if there's a conversation about Blackness, I need you in the space. I have Black Jewish friends, right? There are people in my family that are Jewish. So I need everyone. You need all of us here. And really religion, this whole spirituality continuum, we need, and Adam, and I want you and Deborah to think about this, we need a whole space for that. Because I need my very woke, conservative Christians, Bible thumping folks, Quran carrying folks in the same room. And we don't do that well. And I want that. That's one of my big goals, because with us moving from a charity to justice model, it's going to be imperative that we sit here. Our God is going to ask all of us to come into the room. If your God is a rock, I want you in the room too. See, it's that type of conversation we need to have. Because if we look at the state of just religion, period, and the work that is being done, we know that going into sanctuaries over the past 10 years has declined. And guess what? COVID helped it even more. And so now we have an influx of spirituality. We have a younger generation of children and young adults who worship differently. We also have a big disconnect to our own communities and our own people, right? And so it becomes, what are we prepared to do? So that's what I'm going to shut up now. It's other people. Y'all talk.
Well, no, Dawn, I want to thank you for creating this space and for welcoming us to this space. And absolutely, I echo everything you just said, and we are with you in all of those endeavors. So anything that we can do to partner with you on that, we are all in.
Dawn, you and I have talked a lot about young professionals before, and how this generation is in such a position to make change. I mean, every young generation has been in a position to make change historically, but now it's our job to take it in our hands and go with it. And I know, and Noam knows that we have some passionate people in Nashville's Jewish young professional community. It's smaller than other bigger cities, but I know that we have some really good voices that can lend their input as well, and maybe even empower others to get involved.
Hi, my name is Valerie, and I just want to thank you all for this. This has been so wonderful. I'm a grandparent now. I was a parent, and I teach Bible. I taught Bible study, because I even took my Bible study kids to visit other denominations and Jewish synagogues. So just for them to understand and learn the other ways of doing things. So thank you so much for this. This has been wonderful.
I want to thank you all as well for being so patient as I joined you on different platforms. Dawn, thanks for all you're doing. And Deborah and Noam and Adam, thanks for this presentation. I just wanted to throw out one idea, perhaps, to build a broader network of nonprofit leaders who can learn. So, we have the faces from each community who are doing sort of the warrior work. But Dawn, maybe there's a way that the nonprofit community through CNM identifies a day of learning, or a day where we all come together and just bring ourselves and learn about everybody else's selves. So we're not, we're lucky to have experts to teach and tell, but we're not going to move the needle if others are telling us and teaching us. That we all have to find ways in ourselves to identify who we are, what our background is, where we come from, what is our makeup, and what we need to learn about our friends, our colleagues, and maybe there's a strength in building it that way, that we can all just bring who we are. And that's the day we all leverage. The whole nonprofit community is going to lean in and learn. We've been focused on DEI work this year. We've been focused on it. We just all together lean in and learn. So it empowers, I think, those who maybe don't feel like they're the experts or the warriors, or maybe I haven't identified with a community issue and I feel ignorant. So I think that's a way to bring people together, where it's just we're all leaning in to learn and to get to know each other and strengthen our community by knowing each other. So I throw that out there.
Dawn, please jump in with all the information. Yep, you're going. Go for it.
No, that's good. I was just going to say excellent, because that's exactly what I'm doing. And that's what we will continue to do. So please make sure your contact information is in the chat, because we are capturing this information. And Abby J is our champion. And luckily, you have someone here who is going to lead that charge. So Abby, I've got to jump to another call. I'm going to let you close this out here. And I appreciate everyone for being in this space.
Thank you, Dawn. Well, I would be
Thank you, Dawn.
I would be remiss to not put a highlight on some of our programming that we're planning next year. We just did a day of convening for our Native brothers and sisters. It was called Native Voices, Our Roots, Our Reality. And we want to do that at least 4 more times next year, every quarter. And that with our last one, or one of them, culminating in an All Nations Day, where we can really put an emphasis. Okay, so where we can really pull the themes the common themes that we hear from each of our different affinity groups and address them as a social justice intention. I believe that's the impetus behind that. Dawn, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm really excited to be a part of it. We also have a few equity initiatives coming up, but we want you guys at that table. We are in the planning process of that. And so we're very excited to partner with you all and different people in the community to make sure that we have as many voices at that table as possible. I will close out the program today to let you know that I will be sending an email out either today or Monday to let everyone know who could come and couldn't come, exactly what we talked about. I just want to thank you all for being here. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Noam. Thank you, everyone. This was such an important conversation. I know it's very close to my heart, but I even learned so incredibly much. So if you guys want to say a quick word, let me know. But I just want to thank you all for coming to this table today.
Yeah, just thank you for including us, and we look forward to staying involved and engaged in this process. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.